right, welcome to Screen Chat. I'm Neale Bashins, and this is the show where I sit around with friends and talk about film and television and pop culture. With me today, Warren Nightingale. Warren, welcome back again.
Hey, Neale. It's good to be here. You know what? Every time I come, the seat gets more comfortable. It's like the cushions,
it is slowly conforming to your ass, and I am almost thinking about buying another cushion to just swap it out when you're not here, so I stop interfering with the process.
Absolutely. This is really comfortable.
Yeah, awesome. Doing another two-hander today. It's been a minute since we've done one. We did have a different topic than today, but due to illness, the third guest couldn't make it, so we're just sort of shooting from the hip here.
All right, let's do it.
And it works out timing-wise because we're recording this less than, 5 days before the release of Avengers Endgame.
Wow. Yeah, how many years in the making has this come to now?
Since 2008.
Yep.
So this is an 11-year journey to get here. So and we both like the Marvel movies and stuff like that. So we're gonna talk Marvel today. We're not super prepared, so this might be a little more off the top of our head than a usual episode here. Not a lot of notes on my end. I don't know about you, but we're just gonna wing it. So cool with you?
Yeah. No, let's do this. I'm looking forward to it. Again, like Neale said, it's gonna be a lot from the top of the head. And as I was coming over, I was started thinking a little bit about it. And I was like, yeah, you know what were some kind of key elements? And I'm just going to start off by saying, you know what? Honestly, the closer that we're getting to Endgame, the less excited I actually am.
I'm not going to lie to you. I had that same thought earlier this week.
Really, yeah?
I was talking to a friend at work about it.
Yeah.
And I think in the marketing and promotion for it, they've peaked too early.
I think so too, and even just I had a chance to watch Iron Man again the other day because I thought in preparation to Endgame coming, it'd be nice to revisit that, kind of where it all started.
Well, that's your favorite of them, isn't it? If I recall, or it's one of your favorites of the MCUs.
I would always put it. I would definitely. There's times when we talk, okay, which was the best, of the films, and I would say Iron Man, just because it sort of was the gateway. Plus, it sort of to me gave what the Marvel voice would be in this sort of corner of the cinematic world. However, watching that film again now and haven't seen it in years, it did not age well for me. I was like looking at it. No, it's still fun and enjoyable, and it's spending time with Tony Stark.
There's things in it that would not be in it in the Disney age.
Exactly.
It predated. If people aren't aware of this, Disney did not always own Marvel Studios. It was probably about 3 or 4 years deep before Disney bought Marvel Studios and bought Marvel and ended up owning Marvel Studios. But yeah, there's things in Iron Man 1 that would not fly in a Disney era Marvel movie.
Oh, and I would even just say in the era of 2019,
different sensibilities.
There's definitely, you can see the feeling that I'm like, ooh, that's kind of interesting. And just to talk about specifics, what I'm referring to is just a portrayal of kind of some of the females in there, right? Like
Tony Stark is a lot more of a womanizer,
killer kind of guy.
Yeah.
Like he's a ladies' man, and
they've backed off on those aspects of his character,
and just like female indulgence, really. Like he's on the airplane, and the stewardess are like all like kind of stripping and kind of doing the dancing, the go-go thing, and I'm like, whoa, okay, that you would not see now, and. The report, he sort of beds the reporter, and Piper comes in to take out the trash, and I'm just like, whoa, okay, this has some things in it that I'm just like,
definitely its attitudes towards women is not in line with what would fly in a film today.
Exactly, and
without addressing it, it's not addressed as a character flaw of his.
No,
it's almost celebrated as, well, look at him, he's a playboy.
Yeah, and not that movies have to age well, because there are essentially
some things are never going to. Yeah,
but just looking at that, and then now that this is going to be what 22nd film in the universe that I think it is.
I believe so.
And with some of the films that have come along the way, and thinking about the last Avengers, the Infinity Wars, there just seems to be holes. There's enough holes in it, as well as, and I know we're going to get into all of this, but even just the character of Captain Marvel now being added to the mix sort of feels like, to me, there's, I don't know, I guess what excited me about the journey along the way was almost like when you have a really good miniseries or a really good TV show that's really well thought out, and you hit the marks. And I would say something like, for me, Game of Thrones would be an example of that, where you're you can see, or even like a Breaking Bad, where you can kind of see, okay, maybe they didn't have everything figured out, but there's definitely certain benchmarks that really support the journey along the way. And for me, the more time I'm spending in and thinking about, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it just feels like there's some holes in it that I'm just like, I don't know.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of fans and, people that are hardcore comic fans, comic movie fans, maybe all kinds of fans of it, are imagining backwards and in their own mind retconning.
Yeah.
I know, like, of a few specific people I know in the real world that even if I can nail them down and get them to acknowledge that no, it was not all planned out, and it's not like they've had all these movies written out all along.
Yeah.
In their minds, they still believe that this is all a grand plan, right down to, you can start off with on the very surface of Thanos, his character, and the way it was not all planned out. They threw him in almost as an afterthought in the post-credit scene of the first Avengers film, and already then supposedly he had his plan underway, but then never did anything about his plan except hang around and look sinister in a chair for 8 or 10 movies before finally in last year's in Infinity War all of a sudden accomplished his plan in like a week and a half. And even though he supposedly wanted the stones all along, in the original Avengers film, the idea is that he sends Loki to Earth to secure one of the stones.
That's right, yeah.
And I don't even know if they had it planned out at that point, but afterwards, later on, we find out that another one of the Infinity Stones is actually in Loki's magical staff. It was like an artifact buried within an artifact. So did Thanos really give away a stone as an attempt to get one back and in the process lose both?
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
Right?
No, it doesn't. There was other stuff too, like early on, the Infinity Gauntlet itself appeared as an Easter egg in the first Thor film, just sitting in Odin's treasure room, complete with stones and everything. Later on, they sort of retcon that by having Hela in Ragnarok reference it as a fake, just offhandedly again.
Right, yeah.
And there's no rationalization for why you'd have a fake Infinity Gauntlet complete with stones hidden in Odin's vault of all his treasures and weapons. So just they addressed it, but it's almost silly. They should have just ignored that it happened earlier on. And then at some point, also in one of the Easter eggs of one of the previous films, I forget which one, or in the post-credit scene rather, Thanos is shown saying, "Fine, I'll do it myself," and putting on the gauntlet. Except then when we get to Infinity War, he just had the gauntlet made a week ago or something by that giant dwarf guy played by Peter Dinklage in whatever. So they've changed just those things along the way, these little details. So no, it was not all planned out along. At some point they dreamed up, hey, what if we made Thanos a big bad? And then they've just gone along the way. And, I think also it's good. It can have good and bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes it's good.
Right? Yeah.
Sometimes it's good to write a thing far out and go, this is our plan, and we're going to it. But also, the Marvel movies, part of why, and they're not all great, but I think the successful ones, I think probably a lot of their success comes off of that there's not one singular voice telling this story. They're letting different directors and writers come in and different styles come in, which has kept it fresh at times, and the best ones are the ones that seem a little bit fresher. Where if you'd had some solid plan along the way and told new writers coming in, you can do your own thing, but you also have to do this and that and the other thing. And when they're doing that more is when it suffers. Reference Avengers 2, which really seems like it was just the purpose it was serving was to set up more movies rather than be its own thing.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because then it really kind of does speak to the way Marvel has sort of exceeded expectations. Like, going back in the day when Iron Man first came out, I'm sure, from what I recall, a lot of people are like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Iron Man's not really a major superhero.
He was like a tier 3 or a tier 2 at best, but it's all they had the IP for at the time, the rights to.
Exactly, and they come out with it, and they came out with a really fun film. Mm-hmm. And then, something like Guardians of the Galaxy. And I remember, seeing the trailers going, okay, I think this can go one of two ways.
That was the one I thought was going to miss.
Yeah.
When they talked about Guardians, and I'm a pretty decent comic book fan. I think I'm a deeper level fan than you are.
Oh, big time. Yeah, I fully admit that.
From growing up.
Yeah.
And the Guardians of the Galaxy, where as a person that was fairly nerdy as a comic fan growing up, I only had a peripheral or a tangential knowledge of them without any real knowledge other than that they were a space-based sort of a team, whatever, knew nothing. And I'm like, this is cutting too deep. I'm like, this is the one that's going to flop. And instead, it ended up being maybe one of their top 5.
Yeah.
Probably on my top 5.
A lot of fun. And again, it's a very different film from a lot of the other ones in the Marvel Universe, but it's a lot of fun. And I think it speaks to what you're saying. Someone coming with a different voice, right? And,
yeah.
And I would say the same.
That would be James Gunn in that case.
James Gunn in that case, who, is now back.
Had gone and back again, yeah.
And then, of course, like Ragnarok, I would say very much is kind of that sort of similar outlier where, it's very different from a lot of other ones.
They gave Taika Waititi a freedom to just do a thing.
Yeah.
And that's my favorite. I would say that it's like neck and neck with Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
But Ragnarok is probably my favorite Marvel movie.
Ragnarok
as it stands. As of right now, I would say it's probably... It and Winter Soldier go 1 and 2 with me, and like they can trade back and forth depending on the day.
Yeah, what's funny about Ragnarok is it's on Netflix, and I decided one day just to throw on a few minutes just to kind of, because I enjoyed the titles and enjoyed moments of it, and I just sat down and just again it rolls really quickly and it's a lot of fun, and I think there's a lot of repeat value in that one. You can watch that film again and enjoy it. Quite a bit the second time.
Well, I saw it.
Time, yeah.
If you remember, I saw it twice in one day. The first time we saw it,
I remember I called you up saying, "Hey, head out to
you weren't sure. You had a very busy weekend on deck and weren't sure if you were going to get to see it. And I was really excited, and I didn't want to crush you. Oh, sorry. So I didn't even tell you, but I went right after work with my buddy Jim and saw it, and I wasn't going to tell you, so I wasn't going to spoil we're seeing it together. Yeah. I got home. Jim dropped me off. I made dinner, and then I don't think I was even done eating, and you called me or texted me very excited.
I was in the neighborhood.
You were in the neighborhood, and you'd freed up your Friday night, and you want to go see it? And I'm like, yep. And it was not just in being a good friend. It was that good that I totally wanted to see it 2 hours after just seeing it the first time.
And so it speaks
it's
to
a great one,
value,
and I think it's because it's if you're a comic fan like me, there's enough deep Easter eggs and things in there that to kind of scratch that itch, but it's also extremely accessible. That the Easter eggs are done in such a way that if you're a person, you could take someone that's never really read a comic book and they can watch that and absolutely be entertained just as much by Ragnarok, because it's just very... And Taika Waititi hit the pulse of, up until that point, Thor worked as a side character, but his films... I liked the first one. The second Thor, not so much The Dark World, but... Even in liking the first one, I think I liked it because I liked Thor as a comic and I read it as a comic when I was a kid.
Right.
And if I would look at it critically, I don't think the first one is by any means one of the best of the Marvel films, or even the best of like just the first of each mini-series in it or whatever. But with the third one, Taika Waititi figured it out. They cracked the code that they stopped being so serious with Thor and realized this is a superhero that is supposed to be the literal Norse god of thunder who lives on a magic planet with a tree and travels the world and fights with a hammer, but comes to Earth as a superhero and is a member of the Avengers. That is batshit crazy. And so they got Taika Waititi, who has an awesome sense of humor, and he wrapped his arms around that aspect of it and went, this should be insane. And they made an absolutely goofy and yet incredibly fun action adventure buddy film, and also figured out that accidentally in the earlier films they realized that the Hulk was a really great counterpoint for Thor and made this wacky buddy movie, and then threw in Valkyrie. It's just an amazing... It's like that's why it's probably my favorite, because it's just so many wacky elements, and they cracked the code on how to make that character work.
Yeah, and I like the point you made about how someone could just walk into it and really enjoy it. And I think it was because it wasn't suffering the idea that it had to get to a certain point, or it had to follow a certain playbook, which kind of speaks against what I was saying a little bit earlier. But I think ultimately, it doesn't quite like as an entire universe. It doesn't quite land as a journey that I was kind of hoping that something. You're talking the overall cinematic,
all
MCU, all MCU, the whole.
If you were to back up and do things, you would change things here and there.
Yeah, and maybe that's a little, and I recognize that is unfair. However, in this day and age when like the sophistication of audiences and just, because I would say even just look at like television of the sitcoms of the 70s and 80s are very different from, a lot of the shows we have now. And as audiences, we've grown up, and expectations are that much higher, and people are that much more sophisticated in terms of being able to watch and interpret and understand cinematic language and pieces that I would say probably audiences before didn't necessarily have that level. And with that, I think expectations have grown. And my expectation of, here's a really cool idea that I think is awesome, is that over a decade we have this world that we've been participating in and leading up to now this film as sort of like the end of a chapter or closing what that 10 years is, that I just feel like, oh man, I wish it was just a little bit this and a little bit that. And even in, we talk a bit about marketing. The great thing about Ragnarok was that was one of the best trailers I would say ever.
The first trailer for that was amazing. I watched the second trailer, but I didn't need it. That first trailer, I watched that. I had probably, if you counted up, if you ran a stopwatch on the amount of times I watched that first 2-minute trailer, it would probably be over 3 hours by the time I actually saw the movie. I just kept watching that trailer again. I would have paid money to go watch the trailer.
Yeah, just great beats. They have that moment of Thor kind of talking, as a narrative, but it's actually him, in that particular predicament, which opens the film, which is a great bit. But the use of Led Zeppelin's "Immigrant Song" just really, hits a note, and it really worked well as a trailer. It just thought, okay, this feels like a tight thing. When so many trailers feel cookie cutter, or you feel at the end of the trailer, oh, I've seen the entire film now. Thank you for saving me 2 hours in this 5 minutes. I got the same story. I'll probably get this much out of it. But again, with those Thor trailers,
with Ragnarok's trailer, you had not seen the film.
Yeah,
you got a flavor of what it was going to be.
Yeah.
But even at that was just a small taste. Once you bit into that whole meal, it was fantastic.
Yeah. So now building up to Endgame, I was really hoping we were going to get a campaign that would be unlike any campaign. Like, you had a decade to build from, in which, and I believe you and I chatted about this before. What would be really cool is because with comics, the imagery is so iconic. Like, when we see the shield, right? We know the history of that character, or at least at the very much, it has a lot of weight to it. And so, can you imagine all of a sudden Captain America's shield comes up, and it's just a voiceover, and it's sort of almost borrowing from, let's say, sports. Or boxing or something like that, right?
They promote big events with,
and we don't even have to see anything about the film, but just knowing that, this is the ultimate fight coming up, and this is what I need to do, and maybe just show a couple clips from previous films, and that's your your TV teaser.
In their obsession to not have spoilers out, they could have shown almost zero footage from this film,
exactly,
and strictly done custom-made trailer, custom-made shot stuff, like just character pieces talking, because we know these characters, and we know just reiterating what their journey's been to here and what's going to happen, and now they're facing this great annihilation.
Yeah. And the iconography of comics is so powerful for that you could easily do that and borrow from that and not even show, like you said, a frame from the film.
No, and instead, I was telling somebody about this the other day, that I almost feel like they've outsmarted themselves somewhat.
Yeah.
That they've been doing it for a couple of years, and they absolutely did it on Infinity War, where they inserted imagery into the trailers that was not actually in the film. To throw people off.
Yeah.
And they admit, they're out front, that they're doing it again with this, and they're saying, like only a third of what you've seen or something like this is actually in the film. And I'm like, then why are you showing trailers? How about just don't show trailers?
Yeah.
Because at this point, I don't know if this is like, and I'm going in with no expectations. I want to see a big comic book spectacle-y thing. But for some people, I'm wondering if they have not now, by putting in false imagery and things and trying to mislead people, knowing that basically people take these small snippets and try to extrapolate the entire film to talk about it before it comes out. What if they lead people to extrapolate a better film than they've made? Or if not better, just like, I'm a person, I've imagined these things because they've sort of tricked me into thinking this and that's going to happen. And if it doesn't, I wanted to see that. Am I now disappointed? Either I didn't see this thing, or maybe I thought I was so smart that I was ahead of them and I figured it out. And when I'm proven to not be smart and they've fooled me, do you really want to be fooling your audience? There's a difference between a plot twist that goes, oh, wow, and subverts expectations, and fooling your audience. And I think when you're trying to fool your audience, you're fooling yourself.
Oh, I agree. And
you're outsmarting yourself.
And audiences are way more sophisticated than before. People will be sitting down and remembering and piece together things from trailers and things like that, where, films typically and the teasers of before. Well, actually, once upon a time, it was always those really splashy kind of things where the words would come up and be like adventure.
Yep.
This and that. But then eventually, once we get into the 70s, you saw a lot of teasers where it just sort of gave you the flavor of the film as opposed to the whole film. And again, if you want to lock it into like superheroes, like look at this, the very first Superman trailer or a teaser was just
flying through clouds. Not even the character flying through clouds. It was just they shot it from a plane, just flying through clouds, and you will believe a man can fly.
Yeah, and you go, oh man, I have to see that. Even though you didn't see anything from other than what would be the opening title sequence.
You could have had a whole series of 30-second promos for Avengers that was just ash raining. Yeah. To be evocative of of where the characters got turned to ash or turned to dust in the last film, with different main Avengers like Cap, Black Widow, Iron Man, Thor, whatever, Bruce Banner, talking over it.
Exactly.
With each of their own character journeys.
Yeah.
And then you could have spliced those together into a 2-minute trailer of where it's just ash falling and whatever. And then maybe slowly pulling back to see that the ash is falling on the big Avengers logo, the big A.
Oh, there we go.
And with a date. Not that you even need a date.
Yeah.
Who doesn't know this movie's coming out that's going to go see it?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, there's 4 people in the world left right now that probably aren't seeing it next weekend, and that's...
Well, the pre-sales are breaking records everywhere, and
And granted, those are records that they designed to be broken.
Oh, for sure.
But anyway, it's going to do huge business the opening weekend. So, like, it almost doesn't need marketing. And I guess they've got money to spend, and, you don't want to take jobs away from the marketing people, but they sure could have reeled back in the way they did it. And, I think getting back to our original point of about 20 minutes ago was because of the so much anticipation of it that they have stoked themselves.
Yeah,
it peaked for me. My interest peaked about a week ago.
Yeah, and same with me. And I guess that's why what I'm saying is that because they could have taken this in areas that we haven't been before, which is why I was really anticipating excitement. Because if all of a sudden they took marketing in a way that we haven't seen for a long time, or that hasn't really been done as a campaign that kind of way, I thought, okay, you know what, you can do something a little bit different, and also unlock a few doors here that we haven't seen and get people excited about.
It almost feels like at times that the executives at studios feel like they're almost like living in fear of the internet fans. Yeah. Even though it's proven that the internet fans, or the ones that get vocal, are less than 15% of the actual movie-going audience. But they sure seem reactive to them at times, and it's become this thing that a lot of these people on the internet, or people that are hardcore, doing all these analysis and making videos and watching videos and trying to extrapolate the plot from a couple of screenshots and looking for spoilers. These people seem to have come up, some of them, they've grown to have this sense of entitlement, like they are owed a trailer. And you see the same thing with Star Wars and other big things, that they feel like they are deserving and they are owed trailers and teasers. And it's so the studios are like, well, we have to put this out a certain amount ahead of time. They did not need to start marketing this film before Captain Marvel, and yet they were. Yeah. And then Captain Marvel, you and I have discussed her. A lot of people liked it, and I don't take it away from them. It has good elements. To me, largely beyond the fact, apart from the fact that it was the first Marvel movie that was main character was fronted was a female character, that's about all it has going for it for me. Other than that, it was a pretty generic, safe Marvel movie. It felt very just generic branded to me, but it almost feels like, in the grand scheme of things, it was just a 2-hour piece of marketing for Avengers.
And again, I agree with you. Having a female character in the main role,
it was overdue.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's great. And there's lots of others that
And it's so weird that even though for the past 10 or 11 years, for the first time, starting with basically Iron Man, around the time they came out of the gate strong with Iron Man, and at that time, Warner Brothers was killing it with the Batman, the Dark Knight franchise, and the Nolan's Dark Knight. Yeah. But since then, Marvel's been in the driver's seat, and all of a sudden the pendulum swung to where Marvel has been far more successful at the movie theater than DC has been. And DC's really been sort of all over the place and hit and miss. And yet somehow Marvel, in all of that, missed the opportunity to get to market first, with a main character being a female superhero. And instead, DC walked in, Warner Brothers walked in and just slapped them in the side of the head with Wonder Woman a couple of years ago.
Exactly. And and they had it set up for Black Widow. Black Widow could have had her own film years ago.
Now, that's an interesting thing. I wanted to call it back to a thing a couple of minutes ago, and then we got off on a tangent, too. When you referenced starting with the very first Iron Man and carrying forward into the second Iron Man, that Tony Stark that Robert Downey Jr. and Jon Favreau, writer-director Jon Favreau, created was very much in line with how the character used to be in the comics. He was a very flawed character, but now they've softened him to not be. They took out his treatment of women largely being inappropriate, and also he was an alcoholic in the comic books, which I was actually almost interested to see if they would to see them tackle that, but in a Disney friendly environment they decided to sort of sand that off and back away from it. But he was also having that same treatment towards Black Widow as she appeared as a side character in Iron Man 2, and he's being extremely sexually inappropriate and very
one
much
of those or whatever the line was.
And it's dismissed as a joke to where you would not do that now.
Nope.
And that character and Black Widow, even though fans were screaming for this to be for her to get a movie, somehow they haven't met it, and they supposedly have one in development now. But how did they not
do that
fast track this in the pipeline right after Iron Man 2?
I marvel at that.
A great actress in Scarlett Johansson, a character that all of a sudden, whether they intended to or not, maybe caught them off guard by connecting with audiences, and she's supposed to be part of the main Avengers, but it's like her and Hawkeye are like the tier 2 of the Avengers behind the quote real ones or something. How did they not go, how did they not realize even as recently as 8 years ago or 7 years ago that more than 50% of the population of the planet is women, and hey, maybe a superhero that looks like them might connect.
Yeah, and definitely a missed opportunity. Absolutely, 100%.
And not to slag on Brie Larson as Captain Marvel, this looks like this could be a thing. Maybe that movie itself didn't connect for me personally.
Well,
but it's just this is a way coming out this is coming late to the game for me.
And for me, how that sort of contributes to the overall universe is that her character is really strong.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she is a superhero unlike any other. She can, turn away battleships for God's or spaceships.
She is the proverbial big gun.
Yeah, she's basically the upper echelon manifestation of where all superheroes can maybe eventually get to, like just a whole nother tier. And so for this to be an Avengers event, to all of a sudden have this sort of wane in the wings feels like, okay, it really sort of takes away for me a bit of the journey that has been these primary 6 characters.
This film,
to all of a sudden be like, oh, guess what? We have like a really big gun in the wings, and we can use it now.
As a fan, and also as someone who fancies himself a writer, I really feel like this film should be the conclusion of an arc for those original 5 Avengers characters.
Absolutely.
And the original team. This should be their send off, their whatever last thing. Not that they should all die or something or go away, but this should be their last thing where like the whole universe is conquered, and it should be them at the core of saving the day one last time as this team before maybe other people take up the mantle. And instead, I think like what you're getting at there is that all of a sudden Captain Marvel's been brought in literally right before this film, called in, here you go, oh, by the way, step aside, I got this.
Exactly. Hold my beer. Right? Like it feels like it's not, there's one last lesson that these core superheroes need to do to band together, especially after the Civil War, so to speak. They need to come together.
Like the natural writing.
Yeah, where all of a sudden now this feels like, oh, okay, this is just, I don't know. It feels to undermine itself.
Yeah.
In that
now,
sense,
granted, this could prove out to be like maybe in this film, Captain Marvel is just there to kind of like support them and go and maybe be it, fight off, a physical threat while they go deal with the real problem. I don't know how they've constructed. At this point, I've tried to not have too many expectations of what's going to happen in this 3-hour thing.
Sure.
But
and it's going to be fun. And we'll come back to that 3 hours in a second. But I know you and I have chatted about this before, because I was so hoping that the end credits scene at the end of Captain Marvel would be all of a sudden going back to when the beeper is going off, and then it cuts to Captain Marvel, and then it just be some dust going in the air, right? Like, and I was seriously hoping that would be the case, because all of a sudden we are set up for this big gun, so to speak, and all of a sudden that big gun's no longer there.
You take it off the board in there,
exactly.
If not as the post-credit scene, I would have made that as the opening scene of Endgame.
Yeah, I would love that.
Yeah, run a thing of basically going, previously on Marvel superheroes, and show everything that's built up to this moment for 11 years, and then go, meanwhile in space, and you see the beeper sitting there and dust blows over it.
Exactly.
Now that the shock of that would survive precisely one evening of showings before it was all over the internet if you really wanted to know.
Yeah.
But can you imagine how that would subvert an audience's expectations in the moment going, wait a second, you spent a whole movie building us up that this is the big gun that's going to save the day, and now it's off the board?
Exactly. And I would love that. I would love that because then it goes back to the core Avengers to all of a sudden, okay, they have to figure this out.
And you could have even still had her in the movie by, like, say, 2/3 of this movie is them reversing Thanos' snap and bringing everybody back.
Yeah.
But then they still have to take him out.
Yeah.
And then she could have helped out. Now we really need everybody. We've managed to set it back. Now we've got all our pieces in place, and let's just one last, throwdown here. But
so absolutely. And you mentioned 3 hours. And this thing is 3 hours long? Does it need to? I don't know. Like, because I think I have an idea of what that story is going to be and whether it is or not. I'm like, 3 hours? Will it really be 3 hours? Does it need to be 3 hours?
Does it need to be 3? Now, again, not having seen it now, maybe it'll bear out and maybe it'll be worth 3 hours.
Maybe.
But if it's just 3 hours with 2 hours and 15 minutes of CG fighting alien monsters and 45 minutes of story, then I'd be like, no, this doesn't need to be 3 hours. I'm wondering do they feel that fans will feel gypped if somehow they manage to defeat Thanos in 2 hours and 10 minutes? That they need to put this 3 hours to make people think it's more epic?
Yeah.
I don't know, like, what's the mentality? Not having seen it, I can only speculate, but I'm like, when I look at Endgame, or Infinity War, the previous one, which I enjoyed the first time through in the theater, but even at that, I was like, wow, this is, all over the place. It didn't hold up great for me.
Yeah.
And largely, I would say the larger team, apart from Guardians Part 1, which I thought had a pretty tight story, the team-up movies, Guardians 2 included, and the Avengers films, have not been quite as satisfying to me beyond, like, the first one I had that initial thing of, here's all the superheroes together.
Oh yeah, and there's some great shots there. Of also in the freeze frame of them all kind of, or also when they're in the city and they do the circle around
where they go through, they follow each character to another character. Yeah, there are great moments.
There's great moments, but
overall, the story of them, there's too many characters that need servicing.
It's too, and there's too many points that it seems that there's too many notes that they have to hit for the next film or to bridge off or things like that. It just feels like it's just too stuffed.
Yeah,
and no, I get that.
And as far as I know, there is no intermission built into this film. I have not heard anything about an intermission now. And at 3 hours, you're sort of right on the line of should there be one, should there not be one? Like, can people sit for 3 hours? I really hope I'm not in a showing with a lot of little kids, because people tend to bring small kids to this because it's cheaper than babysitters, I guess, in their mind. But the little kids aren't going to be able to sit for 3 hours and watch this.
But even as a story, though, like, I guess
does it bear out?
Because obviously they have to go and reverse the time, right?
Yeah.
Like we know they have to
somehow they have to time travel or turn things back.
And then they have to figure out a way to beat Thanos. I just don't know if that really feels like to me. Like, and of course, it'll probably be the big send off at the end of however that's going to sort of like how it's going to land.
I'm sure there's going to be a couple of huge, like, battle scenes that go on for 25 minutes or so. It's like a massive CG fest. Just like smashing into you. Like Aquaman was like that, where it just got to be too much. And if we come out of this film next weekend having sat through, if more than a third of it is just CG monsters fighting, I'm going to say it did not need to be 3 hours. They could have probably trimmed it back to 245, 240, and been a little bit more mad. Now, granted, we haven't seen it. Maybe it totally works.
And and maybe 3 hours.
The Russos are really good filmmakers generally.
Oh, you know what? And I have to say, I'm really grateful that they are, because I love their stuff right from back in Community, right back in Arrested Development days, where they're writing, and they have a nice playfulness about what they bring to the table that I think is going to be great. I'm just worried, though, that there's going to be stuff in there that is going to be over the top melodramatic that maybe be a little bit tighter. And who knows? Maybe walking away after 3 hours, be like, "Oh my god, those are the quickest 3 hours ever," or that could easily have been 4. Very simply, that could be the reaction. But
it's going to be interesting to watch fan reactions online.
Yeah,
because I think there could be that element of people that feel they were misled and it didn't live up to what they wanted because they don't do the thing they wanted or something. There's also fans, and I know people like this, that when they get so excited about an event like this, if it's not as good as they hoped, they can't deal with it. I think I'll throw it way back in time to 1999. I remember seeing Star Wars Episode 1. and I walked out of the theater disappointed.
Yeah.
But I think it was almost 3 or 4 years before some of my friends could come around to admitting, yeah, this wasn't all that great. And if you like it, and I'm not saying people can't like a thing,
Yep.
because I like a lot of movies, but I can sit back and critically go, this movie that I really love watching and entertains me, it's not all that good. On paper,
There's flaws.
There are definitely flaws. And so a thing like that, like now if this comes up, there's going to be people that walk out of this that because they've built it up in their heart, it has to be the greatest thing of their lives. And if it's not, they have this look in their eyes and I'm afraid of that.
The Emperor Has No Clothes phenomenon, right?
And I'm going to hate all these arguments that are going to start breaking out on the internet about this thing.
Well, remember Nolan's third Batman?
Yeah.
Like, you and I both walked out of that film going, what was
that? Yeah.
And everybody online, all the online reviews were, I would say, 98% very positive.
Yep.
And the people who were speaking against it were getting
run over.
Yeah.
Because you cannot speak out. He already made 2 great Batman films. How do you think he would not make a third one? Well, because nobody bats 1,000.
Exactly. And
everybody strikes out now and again.
And it's hard to land that last one.
Yep.
And again, which is, coming back
We're
to...
here, yeah.
Yeah, guess what?
If not a trilogy, this is definitely the end of a cycle for the Marvel movies.
Yeah.
And sticking that landing...
It's tough. It is really tough because you build up those expectations, and it's kind of funny. And this is coming back to DC a little bit in Batman v Superman. There's a lot of great imagery in that. That borrows from the comics and really has some really kind of cool moments.
Mm-hmm.
But then it doesn't go anywhere, and now it won't go anywhere. Like I'm thinking about Jokes on You, Batman, and it has like Robin's.
All that cool stuff, interesting stuff in the background that will never
pay off,
become a thing.
Yeah, and so you build up expectations that somehow that can happen, or how somehow that will satisfactorily come to a resolution. And when you even the funny thing is, even when we do get it, we're still unsatisfied. Like for again, this has me thinking a bit about Captain Marvel, in that we find out the origin of Fury's eye patch, and
some things are better left unsaid.
Oh, absolutely. Which to me, it just undermines the whole character, the toughness of the character, and just the mystique of the character. It's kind of like now, okay.
And the only the payoff for it is that they got a joke.
Yeah,
they were able to turn. They turned. Yeah. Here we're gonna take our really tough guy, and we're gonna make a joke at the expense of it. But now that retroactively undermines. And you could have just left it unsaid.
Totally. It's better left unsaid.
You never want to see how he actually got that.
Exactly.
To reference Star Wars, we didn't need to see the Kessel Run. The Kessel Run was better when it was a thing in my mind and I didn't know what it was, and then they put it on screen in a movie and it sucked.
Yeah. So it's always. I think ultimately, leaving us wanting more is always better than giving us what we want to see. 100% for sure.
Backstories are awesome.
Yeah.
When they're backstories in your mind. And as soon as you show a backstory, too much of the backstory, they rarely live up to what the expectation could have been.
Yeah. So all that being said, do you have any predictions about this film in terms of things that we might see?
Okay, are we going to talk about, by prediction, what I think is going to happen, or what I would, creatively, what I think if I had the keys?
There. Either or. You can take it whichever which way you want to.
If I was making it. Now, I would think the two, not top or most important, but I think the two main characters, I think Iron Man and Captain America, just through either design or happenstance, have come to sort of
leaders, right? Yeah.
They are like the two main characters, so to speak, of the Marvel universe so far, and to this point, and it went through different writers writing them, so it wasn't all by design. Yeah. But with Civil War, the Russo brothers managed to set up a thing where these two guys have gone from being antagonistic to each other to being maybe not brothers, but very close comrades in arms, very good friends, and now then set them at odds against each other over a major philosophical issue. Yeah. And this movie is literally them coming back together, having to set aside their differences to save the universe.
Yeah.
So then the questions become, does one of them die? Because a huge criticism of the MCU as a whole thing, and it's a well-deserved criticism, is that nobody important has ever died. There are literally no permanent stakes in this universe. They've brought everybody back.
Yeah.
So to answer that, allegedly, one of these two characters is being sacrificed in this film. And I think, for my money, the better sacrifice in terms of storytelling as we've led up to this and going forward is Captain America.
Wow.
That I think setting up, and in the very first Avengers film, the first time they're on screen together, and when they're initially antagonistic against each other, they have an exchange, and I'm probably paraphrasing, I won't get the exact quote, but Captain America, Steve Rogers says to Tony Stark, you would never make this. You're never the guy that would make the sacrifice. You'd never lay down on the wire and let your buddies crawl over you. Yeah. And Tony Stark answers him, I'd probably cut the wire. Basically, Tony Stark's existence has always been, he's always able to, in the end, use his brain power to outsmart and to cheat death. You know, sort of like James T. Kirk in Star Trek. He's always managed to find a way. This is almost like harken back to Star Trek 2, you know. And so Stark has always found a way to outsmart things. Yeah. And so I think some of his, you know, maybe I might be inferring some of things into it, but I think some of his arc should be, or has been, or should have been, learning about sacrifice. And so I think that the climax of this film could be that one of the characters has to sacrifice in order to ultimately save the universe or defeat Thanos. And Stark tries to be the one to do that, because he's almost in his mind, he's thinking this is how he's learned his lesson. He's going to sacrifice, and he will lay down on the wire. And I think Cap has to say, nope, this is my job. Being that he's a man out of time, he's an old tired soldier, and even though we saw a little bit of a romance thing with him and Sharon Carter, really his true love was Peggy, and she got, you know, he was robbed of that, and she got old without him, and then died, and now he's really, like, you know, he's a man, like his whole world was gone, and he's built a new life for himself, but really he should lay down. And I think that then it should almost be that Stark does have to make a sacrifice, but sacrifice isn't always about laying down your own life. He has to know that, you know, he wasn't able to outsmart it this time, and his friend Steve had to die for this to give them all a chance. And Tony's sacrifice is that he has to live with that knowledge and then go on to sort of be like, you know, the father figure for the future Avengers, or the guy maybe who steps back from the battlefront but still, you know, kind of keep, you know, help when they need it. And I think it'd be better. And I think then going forward, it would allow them to reset the Captain America character, where Captain America becomes a legacy that then they could hand off to the Winter Soldier, to Bucky, because his character going forward, he's a really, you know, they've got, now in the real world, we know Sebastian Stan is signed for a lot more contracts yet. But I think it's a good evolution for his character to go from being the Winter Soldier to being the new Captain America. And I would love to see, you know, if I don't get it, I'll be somewhat disappointed, and I know I'm setting myself up, but I'd love to see like a post-credit scene or the end of the film where Bucky walks into an office because Tony's called him in, and maybe Tony is now, instead of being a combatant and an actual Iron Man, he's like the head of the newly formed S.H.I.E.L.D. That's sort of a thing, and he calls Bucky in and hands him the shield and says, "No, you know, you are the only person that Steve would have wanted to carry on his legacy," which I think would also be really an interesting resolution or continuation of Steve and Bucky's relationship. And even though Bucky is also a man out of time. So he would fill some of those same shoes, and you could almost, I don't know if they plan to do this or not, but I think in the future you could start possibly a new cycle of Captain America films, but now featuring Bucky as the new Captain America.
You know what?
That's who I think should be. That is a thing that I think could be a big
it's been running through my head. You know what I like about that? As you were talking, all of a sudden, just certain images of the movies that just totally popped in my head. You know, the fact that one of the very first things I remember now, just in my head right now, is seeing you know, Cap, before he was Captain America, when he was, you know, in training, jump on a grenade and being that willing to, you know, soldier first, sacrifice first, you know, for the greater good. And that does feel like a natural, like, continuance of that character. And, you know, there's something kind of interesting that, too, as you were talking, also popped in. I can't remember where I saw it. I think maybe it was on a YouTube video or something like that. But they pointed out that Chris Evans, I guess on the last day of filming, put out a pretty emotional tweet saying,
about that he had he's saying goodbye to a character, or he's done this role.
I'm not even going to make a prediction, because I like what you're saying so much that I think that, you know, I'm dialed in. I want to see that on screen.
And now let me throw this in too, that perhaps somehow in the conclusion of this film, they have to get the Infinity Stones and use them themselves, and Steve is like, no, Tony, you're the one that knows how to do this. So you've built the thing, or you have
you're
the
one
thing.
who has to carry on. Yeah.
You take the stones. You got to reset the universe, and I'm going to sit here and take the hit and buy you the time. And now, what if I don't know, the mechanics of this, but that in doing this, Tony's able to just with a small sliver of concentration, use the power of the time and the reality stones to pull Steve out of time and let him go back and live with Peggy. Or somehow pull out, or just give him that for at least a day or something. Here, send him back to be able to say goodbye or something, and just see Peggy when she's young or something again to have their dance. Remember when I think it was in Avengers 2 when like their minds were all getting warped or whatever, and Cap's thing is he had a flashback to like the dance he never got to have with Peggy Carter. What if Tony could give that to him? What if Tony could give that to him?
My last gift is you get to have one last dance.
Or pluck Peggy out of time.
Yeah.
When she was younger, and bring her forward for one moment so that they can have a goodbye.
Something else that supports your theory, too, as you were talking, it just reminded me, too, Doctor Strange said, no. Of all the million different possibilities that he came, there's only one positive outcome. And he ultimately, traded for Tony Stark. He goes, he needs to be a part of that equation. Mm-hmm. His life needs to continue on. So, you may have locked into something there.
Yeah, I do. He did say that. That's a thing. And
I can't remember exactly.
He checked 3 million possibilities, and this was the only possible future of when we win.
Yeah,
and he knew that he had to make the sacrifice, that they had to lose.
Yeah.
So they could win in the end. They couldn't defeat him at this juncture. They had to lose everything to get to a place.
But there was something about Iron Man having to be a part of the equation, or part of or Tony had to live, or something like that. There was something like that. Like the condition was.
I think he's somehow going to, maybe with the help of Peter Dinklage's character, maybe he makes a version of his armor that can somehow harness the power of the stones, because he can't just wield them in your hand. Yeah. But I also think I almost got sidetracked for a second there, and now I've got completely sidetracked and I lost it. Doctor Strange. Yeah. Doctor Strange. Here's another throw-out prediction for you that I've been wondering ever since the first time I saw Infinity War, that I wonder if he's not really dead. That he just made it appear that he dusted away. Because how would maybe Thanos, how would he know the difference? It's not like Thanos is plugged into everybody and knows every person. It's just a random, I'm wiping out half the universe.
But he just sort of
used Doctor his ability. Strange, because he's really been set up that going forward, Doctor Strange, and they do have a Doctor Strange sequel in the works, so we know they're keeping the character.
Yep.
So he really seemed like an important character. So what if he's another one of those major characters that is going to be a factor in this film, and so he's actually just vanished so that he could be behind the scenes setting things up and helping out, and that he might appear that he has not actually been dusted off in this one.
I like that, not only because I like the character a lot, but it actually does kind of fit, because he is that sort of uses that magic and illusion and things like that to kind of be in the backgrounds to make sure he's protecting the world as he needs to. So I think that works really well.
While we're doing this and sort of we're looking past Endgame here too. Another one now. For a time, we briefly skipped over it earlier, just because of nonsense in the real world. James Gunn had been dismissed from Marvel, and so the idea of the Guardians going forward in their own film series was very much in doubt, it seemed. And now things have been, decisions have been reversed. James Gunn has been welcomed back, that once he's done making Suicide Squad, he will be back for, not my joke, I stole that, but it's funny. Yeah. He'll be back for a third Guardians film, which may be somewhat delayed now in its order in which it'll come out in regards to the rest of the films, the rest of the Marvel films going forward, but there is going to be a Guardians 3. Now, I think if you remember Infinity War, Thanos had to sacrifice Gamora, who he did love. Yep. She was his foster daughter, and he threw her off the cliff, and he had to sacrifice something he loved to take possession of the Soul Stone. And so she died in that manner. Mm-hmm. And most of the rest of the characters, Loki was killed early in the films in battle, but most of the characters are wiped out in that snap and dusted. So I think when they reverse the dusting, all those characters are coming back, but I don't think Gamora is coming back.
Oh, really? Yeah.
And when they are dusted, I think, and I'm pretty sure this is in the comics, this is from the comic lore, they don't just wink out of existence. They actually live inside the Soul Stone, and there's a whole other sort of a dimension where they live in sort of a ghostly, existence in there. Yeah. And I think we might see inside there somewhat. And I think the Guardians will be with Gamora, and because in Infinity War they really pushed forward the relationship and showed that Peter, Quill, Star-Lord, and Gamora do love each other. So I think at the end of this film, when the dusting is reversed, I think all the Guardians come back, but Gamora is still left dead and lives in the stone. And I think at the conclusion of the film, the stones, either by explosion or design, will be scattered back into the universe so that somebody else can't just pick them up and cause problems.
Same, yeah.
And I think the third Guardian film will involve something of them going on a quest to find the Soul Stone and finding somebody that can help them go into the Soul Stone to rescue Gamora and bring her out.
Oh, that'd be a good story.
Something along those lines.
Well, I hope when they're in that alternate existence that Gamora slaps Star-Lord a little bit for for not helping,
for being such a dumbass.
For like, okay, we almost have
the glove off.
And you decide to take that. That's the moment that you're going to take.
Boy, do I get annoyed with people that argue and try to rationalize that was a smart decision, or just it's because he loves her so much.
What?
They're all making the ultimate sacrifice to save the universe. Like, come on, that was a low point of the writing in that film.
And that's why like there's some holes in it, which kind of for me gave me less excited. Like the whole time when I was watching, and I love Doctor Strange. He's one of my favorite characters, both in the comics as well as in the Marvel universe. But the whole time I'm thinking, why don't you just slingering his arm off?
Yeah,
like just that'd be.
They literally showed in that film them slingering people's arms off and parts of their anatomy off,
and
almost like it was like a Chekhov's shotgun. It was Chekhov's sling ring. Here, check it out. This is how we'll defeat him later.
Yeah.
And
yeah, exactly. And I was so
and people will say, "Well, you're nitpicking stuff." And you sort of are, but they really blatantly, there was about 8 different ways they actually could have defeated Thanos.
But Doctor Strange is a smart guy. Like, he is somebody who, why would he not think of that? Like he's done all kinds of things to outsmart all kinds of scenarios, and that would be kind of like a 101 type of thing.
And in a film, and I think that one was 2 hours and 40 minutes. I don't know, you can pull up the runtime there of Avengers Infinity War, but with some of the stuff they did in there, they couldn't have trimmed a couple of seconds of beating up CGI aliens to throw in a line of exposition saying that somehow the power of all the stones together is negating the sling rings or something.
Or he
I'll do this and it doesn't
work.
But a lot of holes in that. Looking back, things and
that maybe that is nitpicking, but nonetheless.
Yeah. Well, I'm a comic nerd. We nitpick, you know, and I think it's a thing that can be nitpicked. But and I'm not I do love watching these films, but I can at the same point be critical of them. Going, well, here's the thing, and critical is not necessarily bad always. Yep. Just I can sit there and honestly think, well, yeah, the writing fell apart at this point or that point, but. Going forward, as we're sort of talking past it now, almost like, we can speculate all the live long day about what happens, but maybe like the repercussions going forward. Do you think there's going to be more Thor movies?
Well, after Ragnarok, I definitely do think so. Like, I'm not sure how many Hemsworth has signed on for. I know Brie Larson signed on for like 7 or something like that.
They make everybody sign up for an ungodly amount.
Yeah, so
I don't know where Hemsworth's is in the cycle, but
yeah. I did like Ragnarok.
I will say this. I'll just stop you for 1 second there. That Hemsworth apparently was not all that enthused with the earlier Thor films, but apparently had a blast on Ragnarok to the point where he's like, they've finally made this character somebody that's interesting to me, and I do wish to continue playing him.
Oh,
so
cool.
Okay. Now, do you think he, just to throw ideas out, perhaps down the road another Thor standalone film? But what about if he became part of somebody else? If they had, like say, just the way like Iron Man's popped up as a supporting character in a couple other people's films, what if Thor turns up as a supporting character in the Guardians films?
Oh, see,
because they've seemed to have taken the character more cosmic, and they apparently want to have a whole cosmic wing, so to speak, of the MCU of stories that are set out in space, and Ragnarok sure fell into that category.
Yeah, and I think Thor would be a natural team up for the Guardians of the Galaxy. I think that would be a lot of fun. Like I do know Mark Ruffalo said this is the last time he's playing the character of Hulk. So I'm not sure if Hulk will be along, or if they're just going to make Hulk now CGI always be permanent green. I suppose that's a possibility.
But they'd still need his voice, wouldn't they?
I would think so.
And he was still mocapping the character.
Yeah. Well, this will be using his image for certain, because they certainly made Hulk look like him a little bit.
Doesn't mean necessarily they die, though, right? Like, even if it's the last time they're playing a character, it could just be...
And maybe it's the last time he's playing Banner. And he's just going to come in for, like, a one-day...
it can also be a thing he's saying right now, that at some point down the road, they go, hey, not a whole movie, but we want you to show up for 15 minutes. It's
here and there.
2 days of shooting. Do you want to come in?
Hey, come in.
And when they've all sat on set for, like, a year and a half now together, at some point you're like, yeah... I'm sort of done with this for now. I want to go do my smaller indie films again.
Yeah.
But a couple years down the road, hey, I do miss the band. I'll come back for one show.
Exactly, but I would definitely think that like the cosmic wing could actually be quite exciting. Like all of a sudden, Thor comes on board and helps him out with let's say for example the movie that you were talking about, like the movie in your head that you were talking about. Like I can see Thor being that kind of a character,
if not for the whole thing, but he's in for part of the second act where he comes along and helps him out with the thing, and then
Who knows? Maybe like this generation of Avengers sort of become their own, for lack of a better comparison, like their own Jedi Masters in a sense, where they're no longer part of the team, but they're part of the universe, and maybe they're the ones who like other characters will have to turn to kind of extend their own ability to get the tools that they need to become the next tier, and they sort of become like the teachers, and so we don't really see them, but they maybe pop up here and there, or they're part of an end credit scene, or or they're part of a storyline where whatever the next generation of characters has to kind of a few things to learn by the wisdom of these characters. That'd be kind of neat as a continuance, because what's kind of interesting in all this, I think, is so often in our superhero films we see the origins films, and maybe we see another film or two films, but depending on how well box office is done, but then they're kind of wrapped up, and then we sort of reset the cycle, like Spider-Man. Like how many versions of Spider-Man have we had?
This is the third iteration,
and that's only in 20 years, 15 years, whatever it's been, and it's always kind of the same time period. So it's going to be kind of neat now is to see some of these characters sort of age, and and maybe Captain America dies. Okay, that's going to be in that universe, or maybe Tony Stark goes from that superhero type to them being like a shield. The transformation, I guess, is ultimately what I'm saying would be kind of interesting, like that.
Here's a question for you.
Yeah.
Do you think they could or should put the concept of the Avengers in a drawer for a bit, and we don't necessarily in the next phase, as they call them, the next cycle of Marvel films? Do we always need an Avengers film in each one?
No. I think you can let it build again, right? Then you just focus on a couple of characters. However, the other thing to consider is how much of a life cycle do superhero films have right now? Is this something that is going to be, the longevity of it? Can it exist for another 10 years? I don't know. Like for myself,
I think everything eventually has its time. Like Westerns had their time, and it's not like they go away forever.
No.
But their heyday definitely goes.
Exactly, and for me, I feel like this is going to be like an end of an era certainly for me about superhero films. I'll probably will I go see the next Doctor Strange? Definitely will. I'll be excited to do so. Black Panther, absolutely. I'll go see it opening weekend. However, am I going to have the same enthusiasm? No, it's you. I think for me, it's kind of definitely run its course, and I'll definitely.
I'll say addressing that point. Personally, I've been thinking about this lately too. That 25 years ago, when we didn't have this level of quality of superhero films, I would never have believed for you to tell me there'd be a time when I would start, and I don't want to say bored, but I'm definitely the impact on them.
Yeah.
Of them on me is definitely less than it was 10 years ago.
Oh, exactly.
Because we get them constantly, and not just from Marvel, but we have
times a year, at least.
that genre of superhero, or that sort of like, nerd genre, I'll call it, and I'm not saying that as a bad term, I'm embracing it. We didn't get a lot of those films, especially of this quality, when I was younger. And so that definitely scratches an itch. But that itch has been scratched now for me, that I'm not like you. I'm still going to go see these movies, but it's definitely not with that same enthusiasm.
Exactly.
Like beforehand, the must see.
Which actually you just made me think of something right now, kind of interestingly, is of these 22 films now, soon to be 22 films, would any of them, would you say, is the top 3 all-time superhero film? Because for me, I'm not sure if I would put any of them in there.
Top 3? That's
top
tough.
3. Because, and I think you and I probably adore the same superhero films. I think, Superman would definitely.
For me, that's a personal, that on a personal level, and also I just think, especially of its time, for me, it still holds up. Yeah,
Dark Knight for me, for Christopher Nolan's, to me, that is what really legitimized superhero films in the public consciousness of it being more than just. Something you eat popcorn to and be entertained to, but it can also be a film. And so I would say those 2 films for me are they're pretty tough.
Probably 1 and 2 up there.
But then even, also you look at the first generation of Spider-Man, that was a pretty good. Especially the first two, especially not the third, but especially the first one. That's pretty good. Now, which of the Marvel films, any of them, would sort of crack that lineup? I don't know.
It would be an interesting experiment for you and I to go back and watch that first Tobey Maguire
I think so.
Spider-Man film again. Sorry, I should reference the director, and I've
Evil Dead.
Yep.
Dark
Raimi.
Man. Raimi. Sam Raimi.
Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man film.
Yep.
And I don't know if it will have aged as well.
That's kind of interesting. And maybe because when it came out, also I'm like, well, finally we get a superhero film that is a good film. Like where it comes together.
It was a very high budget, and its look was fantastic.
Yeah.
But there are definitely, I know in my head and in my heart, there's a lot of flaws to it.
Okay, I have to rewatch it.
At the time, they were things that I thought were flaws, but I was like, we're lucky to be getting this quality of Spider-Man film, so I'm not going to nitpick these flaws. But subsequent to that, other films have proven out that a lot of the things that I felt were flaws in there that I think were specific choices because they thought the other choices were wrong have proven that audiences will withstand a very deep-cut, hardcore comic book type thing. And there's a lot of ways in which that one does derivate from source material. And I'm sure a lot of people, if we talked them all out, maybe that's a whole episode. We can do the Spider-Man episode. Actually, we should
that'd be good.
We should think on it. We should think on a Spider-Man episode for the future, and probably bring in a good friend of the show, Simon.
Totally.
Yeah,
especially with the film coming out this summer, that might be kind of.
That's one we're going to have to revisit. Yeah, we're absolutely going to have to get Simon in here on that one. Simon Ovid, frequent guest, because I know he's a big fan. But I would even want to compare and contrast. The most recent Spider-Man Homecoming versus Raimi's first Spider-Man.
I really like Homecoming a lot.
So do I.
Yeah.
I think they really nailed the character.
Yeah.
And I'm excited for the future of Spider-Man. He will be one of the characters right now I am most excited to continue watching films going forward.
I would agree.
Is this current iteration of Spider-Man.
I agree 100%.
Doctor Strange
for me,
I found because I loved the visual look of it. They really tried something different, and I hope they have more in the bag than just more. Not to pun here about magicians, but more in their more tricks than just the visual style of it. Because I think he could be an interesting character.
Black Panther certainly.
Black Panther, everything except the finale of that film, which was way too CG.
Oh yeah, fair enough.
Looking back, if we were going to just for a moment knock on that film. I thought its story was awesome. I just thought the setting of the final battle being basically they turned into two video game characters fighting on the Super Mag train and a little too Aquaman. Where imagine if it would have just been those characters after a big fight with the armies in the field, the two of them strip off their armor and go back to that waterfall and just have it out one more time.
Oh yeah. I would have loved to see that.
I would, so you could actually see Chadwick Boseman and Michael B. Jordan duking it out, and I think it might have had a little more weight than two video game characters. But if I have a knock on the film, it's that. Black Panther. I'm interested to see what they do next. What other else? Thor. Who like I said earlier, I read that character as a kid, and so I was excited he was in the movies. And the first Thor film looked exactly like Kenneth Branagh made it look exactly like the comic books.
Right.
That I remember the Thor comics, Asgard looked really good, and then they ended up spending a lot of the film on Earth, where it could look more like something audiences would recognize rather than this. I don't know if they were really sold on that people would get into this fantastical elements of it.
Yeah.
But then later on, again, this is another case where they were sort of proved later on that people would. And then Ragnarok looks like it's straight out. It looks like Jack Kirby, all of a sudden, his brain was poured out onto film.
Well,
but the look of it, I loved it. Which now I'm going to throw you something here that all of a sudden puts in my head that, again, the look of Thor Ragnarok and the whole cosmic direction.
Yeah.
Let's address...
Oh, I think I know where you're going to go.
You know where I think you know where I'm going here. Let's address
Disney's bought
the recent purchase
Fox.
of 20th Century Fox. Now Disney and the MCU has wide open the door to bring in the so-called first family of comic books, the Fantastic Four, who were at times in their best iterations, very cosmic and had that cool look. What about the Fantastic Four? I would love to see a take on that.
Oh, that has to be in there. Like that, especially since that
and embracing the weirdness of it.
Yeah, and especially since that is like the pinnacle, the pinnacle. We talked earlier about Iron Man, sort of being that as your childhood, the tier 3, tier 4 superhero. Well, for Marvel, this is their headliners.
Yep.
And so for them to come back into the fold of of Disney and being able to, rather than trying to crank one out every couple of years just to maintain the rights to it, now they can sort of properly place it in the universe. Absolutely. And I know you have, because we talked about this before. So I'm not going to take any credit for that, but I like how you sort of have an idea of how it can be positioned.
The take of if we've never brought it up on the show before, I'm not sure, but I think it'd be awesome to introduce them in an adventure where they get their powers set in the 60s, set in like in that time frame.
Right, yeah, exactly.
But make it an adventure that they're not saving the world, they're not saving New York, so that you don't have to retcon and say, well, why has nobody ever heard of them before? Have it be a space-based thing where they get their powers somehow, make it like very classic to the comic books, like they're in a rocket ship and they get irradiated by cosmic rays and it turns, gives them their powers. But have their adventure, and I would even introduce maybe almost as a cameo the character of Doctor Doom.
Okay.
Without him being the main antagonist.
Oh, just sort of like
he's a guy, just like in the comics, that Reed Richards knew him in college, and maybe he's a guy that we see, but not whatever. And then they go somehow through a space warp, and they got to fight some big threat to Earth, but it's away, it's in space. And at the end, they get warped through space and time and whatever. And then, but when they come back home, they realized that it wasn't just a space warp, it was a time warp, and they are not
nice.
in the 60s anymore. They are now set in the contemporary time where all of a sudden there's been Avengers and Iron Man and all these things, and they are, again, they're now sort of a little bit out of their time, but maybe it would also be a wave that they can be somewhat disconnected from Earth so they could be more participants in that cosmic part of the Marvel Universe where they can just be out in space having adventures.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And then I think you could also, you could maybe have a film with them, an adventure set partially on Earth, where they are with Doctor Doom as the antagonist. At some point, fans would riot if they never had Doctor Doom as an antagonist. But he could now have been the monarch of Latveria for 50, 60 years. And you can have a reason, they've always had reasons of why people didn't age, but Doctor Doom there's a reason. He's still around. He's been now a king for all this time, and even maybe not so much as a physical antagonist for them as like that cerebral, and the one that's got he's got an entire kingdom and he does have all kinds of power and stuff. But yeah, a thing like that I think would be really fun to see, an adventure set in the 60s with that retro visual dynamic and style and everything and aesthetic, and then have them brought into the contemporary times, but part of the cosmic world there. And at some point, that's how you do Galactus. Oh. Rather than having Galactus menace right over Earth, we can meet Galactus, we can meet the Silver Surfer again, and I think they would fit very well with that same idea that has been established with Thor Ragnarok of just embrace the wackiness, just wrap our arms around it, and let's just have fun.
See, that'd be kind of interesting. So let's say if all of a sudden you do sort of, sideline the Avengers for a little bit and sort of bring that sort of storyline into the universe.
Well, let me speak on that for a second, because I was gonna. The reason I said sideline the Avengers, and then I totally sort of forgot about the tangent I was going on there, was Stan Lee famously said that every comic book is somebody's first comic book.
Oh yeah.
And my point with the Avengers being back there, that the MCU is in danger of becoming, and it has in some regards become a thing that there is required reading.
Yeah, no, that's true.
For fans to really get into it and understand the films totally, in some of the films, they are failing in the aspect that if you have not seen the earlier ones, you don't get what's going on.
Well, even up to Endgame right now, I would say that there's probably at least 5 or 6 films you have to watch,
and not just the previous Avengers film.
Yeah, no, you have to watch Ant-Man and Wasp to really know.
If you don't, otherwise, there's going to be a lot of times when people are saying to the person they're at the movie with, "What's that about?"
Yeah.
What happened? Who's this?
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think they need to get back to the place of where not everybody wants to see. I've got friends that don't want to see every single Marvel film and don't. Yeah. And they shouldn't have to in order to get them. They should be able to go see any individual film and still get it. And if they get more and more away from that, eventually these billion-dollar box offices will crest and go down. And that will be maybe the end of the...
I think that's going to happen regardless, to be honest. But,
it will. At some point, people are just going to... This won't be the thing anymore, and the next thing will come along, whatever that be.
Yeah.
But a way to hasten that is definitely start making these less accessible. If you want it to continue, they need to be accessible to the first-time fan. Because, hey, you and I have been watching these things for 11 years now. But what about people, what about kids that are,
8.
Just 8,
10,
or ones that even now are 20. Well, they were 9 when these started, and they weren't as sophisticated as a film watcher. And now, if you want these to age with them, they have to, They
Yeah.
have to be something that they can engage with. They have to be accessible to young people and older people, but also like to first-time watchers, maybe to people that are just 7 years old now. They need to be able to watch this without having to go plug 20 movies into their brain to understand what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a lot to catch up on.
Yeah. Another one going forward.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw something at you. What do you think of, because people are jibber-jabbering about it already,
Oh, yeah.
the introduction of the X-Men
Well,
as a family of characters into this MCU?
I am excited that, you know what, there might all of a sudden be a rollback and a relaunch of X-Men, but I would keep that as two separate universes.
I wish I had a bell to bang on right now.
There we go.
Keep going.
Simply because all of a sudden to overload the MCU with sort of what the X-Men universe is, it feels just all of a sudden now we're talking, it just feels too convoluted in the sense of it's just completely over, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe like overreaching, maybe not. But it just feels like it's the two different universes sort of operating with different mythos kind of going on. What I like about X-Men is that it can serve as an allegory, a very strong allegory. And when Bryan Singer did it, he was using it as an allegory for anybody who identified as gay or homosexual and things like that.
And that did come straight from the comics.
And it's
been like that.
Awesome.
Yeah. It's been over time. It's evolved as being allegories for people. Homosexuality. Specifically, I think at times the AIDS crisis. Like people with AIDS, and at other times just other outsiders. But keep going.
Yeah. So in that universe where people have different abilities and special abilities, it seems to kind of fit. Whereas in the MCU, we have gods and and people who are part making the machines in order to, as part of themselves to do the acts. To me it feels like two separate veins of kind of what you would be set up as a foundation for your story. I will say, and they've literally very well, but they've
literally had this problem in the comics too. That there were times when I was a big comic reader, when I was like in my teens, that I would sit there and go, "This doesn't make sense. These two don't jive. This this peanut butter doesn't taste good with this chocolate."
Yeah.
That the X-Men, that whole universe, the whole X-Men family, part of what their best writing, when they were at their best, was when they were saving humanity even though they were hated by humanity.
Yeah.
And there's just no rational way, without doing all kinds of gymnastics in your mind and in the script writing, to explain why this group of superheroes are reviled and hated by people because they have their powers and they're different, but this group right next to them, we embrace them and it's okay because they save the world.
Yeah, because they're sort of an extension and they're the best of what humanity is, or whatever.
It just does not make sense.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And the X-Men, I totally agree with you 100%. I would much rather see them be in a separate X-Men MCU where we can tell those total different kinds of stories.
Yeah.
Beyond the fact that we would be overloading the MCU with a whole bunch of new characters and like there's just too many, and we get back to that required reading. And for the writers, like, what happens? Why didn't Wolverine show up in here? And wouldn't it be great if Professor X hopped over here because he could help this? And where's this?
Yeah.
Where you could? And why didn't the Avengers show up to help them fight Phoenix or whatever the problem is this week?
Yeah, exactly.
Keep the X-Men separate, and you can have a whole other area to free writers up and tell new, different, interesting stories.
Agreed.
Without having to worry of how they conflict with what we've got going on in the MCU, and also probably help maybe somewhat as a company for Disney, as a release company for Marvel Studios, maybe combat superhero fatigue.
Yeah.
That instead of getting 4 movies a year set in the MCU, maybe we get 2 movies a year in the MCU and 2 X-Men movies, or 2 and 1. For now, 2 MCU movies and 1 X-Men movie. So we're still, or whatever, we still got it every third of the year, every 4 months, we get a movie from them with their brand to pour money into their coffers, which is what the business people want at the end of the day. They don't really care about, creativity. They care about, how much cheddar the mouse is getting in his bank. But that would, creatively, that would let us see different things and, not constantly have, it's another Marvel movie. Maybe that would slow that fatigue down a bit and really refresh things.
Yeah, and you know what? And people can are sophisticated enough to keep the universes separate. Like we already
don't give audiences enough credit for understanding that at times.
We already do that with DC and Marvel. Like people keep those superhero universes separate, so they certainly can splinter off. And and certainly to me, the Defenders that can be a separate universe as well. Even though I know in the television shows of those characters, they are part of the same universe. But to
not
me,
really. Hey,
but
that's all been sort of done out, and they're all dead now.
Yeah, well, the TV shows are,
yeah.
But during the run of the shows, they would reference the different.
That's a one-way relationship.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a good way to put it.
And it's not just you and me saying that. That is actually the internal creative policy at Marvel Films. Because Marvel, I don't know if you know this or not, but Marvel Films and Marvel Productions, which makes the films, and Marvel Television are two separate divisions of the company that do not collaborate. That the TV shows were allowed to reference the films as a way to try to take momentum from them for their projects, but the films, as per Kevin Feige's policy, do not reference the shows, and they don't count.
And that's really too bad that it was set up that way, because I would have loved to have seen that as separate universes, because those shows, not that it was dark in the shows, but they could have gone to a few darker places that it can almost be like Marvel dark.
They do.
Sense,
well,
right?
now they have, apparently, I have never seen Cloak and Dagger, but their Cloak and Dagger TV show is nothing to do with the films, but apparently is pretty decent.
Yeah.
I fell off S.H.I.E.L.D. after the first season, and S.H.I.E.L.D. apparently, I've heard, and that was true when I was watching it. It was very beholden to the films, even though it was like the annoying little brother that the films wouldn't reference the S.H.I.E.L.D. TV show, but the S.H.I.E.L.D. TV show was constantly referencing and taking any attention they could from the films and taking guest stars and stuff. And now apparently that's fallen off and they don't, and apparently the show's better for it. But now, sorry to hurt you here, but they're now, for the Disney Plus channel, these new cycle of Marvel films they're making are being made by the film division. And so they will all be referential.
Okay.
So, and this could also continue to convolute things where, like, now, do I have to watch the Hawkeye TV show? And I kind of would be maybe interested in a Hawkeye show depending on how they go with it.
Especially if they end up going down the Ronin.
Do I have to get Disney Plus to understand the films now? Like, are they going to start really as a business thing? Are they going to continue to interlock these more and end up tripping themselves? I certainly hope not.
That's a good question. Ultimately, I do think that there's a potential for another area that's kind of untapped. That would be sort of like Marvel Dark, where you have the Punisher, you have Jessica Jones, you have these characters, but really amp up the sort of the mature elements of what the comics are like. So.
I really particularly liked Daredevil season 1, and Jessica Jones season 1.
Daredevil is a well-made. Jessica Jones, because it felt like the comic.
I enjoyed the first season of Luke Cage. But it wasn't super duper for me. Yeah. The second season of Daredevil had its moments, but not on the overall. The third season was a little bit better again. Jessica Jones, the second season, didn't really light me on fire. No. Iron Fist did not light me on fire at all. Yeah. It was boring. Yeah. The Defenders show itself was very convoluted and boring.
Yeah, it's too bad.
Yeah, but because they sure started off strong with Daredevil and Jessica Jones.
Yeah,
but. So be it.
So I think there might be some untapped stuff there, especially if they sort of do kind of go a little dark with it.
Yeah, and I definitely think there's a room for, there's certain characters that I think succeed well in the model of a theatrical film.
Yeah,
reference Iron Man, reference Thor. But I think there are characters that could also be serviced by the television model of the 10-episode television series.
Totally.
And as much as I'd say they should have made a Black Widow movie, I think Black Widow is a character that would be more interesting as a TV show, as a 10-episode streaming model show.
Especially as a spy series, right? That sort of espionage and learn her how she come to be.
It might almost be too late for that.
Yeah.
I'd also, and it's too bad they've.
Oh, I agree. It is too late for that.
It's too bad
that should have been.
And they've already sort of
now
with the flashback nature of Captain Marvel film with Nick Fury in there, they've sort of this ship has sailed. But I think at some point you also could have seen like a Nick Fury origin series where like a 10-episode, like you said, leaning more into like the espionage and maybe like when he's not quite the leader of S.H.I.E.L.D. yet, but just a S.H.I.E.L.D. guy. You could have had some really cool spy thriller type TV shows at an 8 or 10 episoder showing just Nick Fury without like Thor backing him up. But that ship's kind of sailed now. But what character do you think there's any characters right now kicking around the MCU that you'd like to see as a television show rather than a film?
I think you mentioned the ones that I thought would be kind of interesting, like Hawkeye. Like, certainly, I think there's lots there that because he does change as a character and his trajectory. Like he metamorphosizes into Ronin, which kind of would be kind of interesting. I'd have to think about that a little bit. Maybe Scarlet Witch would be kind of interesting, but then again, like some of these characters are sort of interlocked with each other, like Scarlet Witch and like Doctor Strange are kind of in the same world, and so I'm not sure if that would work or not. I don't know. I'd have to.
Maybe it's a chat for another day.
I have to give it some thought in terms of, because let's put it this way: is there something right now I'm going, oh my god, they need to be making that as a TV show? And there's nothing that comes to mind. I'd be stretching right now to really think.
I think part of that for me is just like I would not categorize myself as having superhero fatigue yet, but I can definitely see that day coming where I'll be like, we could slow down a little bit on these.
Yeah, that's certainly true.
Okay, one big hope or dream for this film that for Endgame. What do you think? It's something out there. I don't know, a prediction or a hope for it or anything. Throw something out here to send us home.
To cap it off?
To cap it off. Well played.
I do hope there is a big scene between Tony and Cap, just because I agree with you. They seem to be the thread from the beginning to the end. I hope it's because they come together and they sort of have one last moment in all that, just because for me that's the thorough line of what the Avengers is, and I hope it's not just a new character or just a new twist or something cute or whatever, but it is something that sort of ties in the whole journey together. For me, that's what I would hope.
Yeah, I'd have to say that's probably for me too, and I just hope that there's enough story to support a 3-hour runtime and not just CGI, a bunch of big fights. Like, the fighting is fun, but it's the sizzle, and I still want the steak. I need the steak. There's lots of sizzle's fun, but you still need some steak to chew down on.
Exactly. Yeah, there can be some big moments because some of these characters will probably be the last time they're in this film. So hopefully it's treated as enough airtime without being melodramatic.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for doing this on such short notice and sort of changing the topic up here.
There we go.
And we will get back to our other topic, which was going to be the films of Michael Mann, which we are
looking forward to
fans. Not next time, but when we can reschedule with our other guests. So, we'll get to that when we get to that. And until then, anybody listening, I hope you enjoy. We've given zero spoilers since we know no spoilers, but
spoiler-free radio.
Thanks for doing this, Warren, and until next time, make mine Marvel. Excelsior.